Hey, what's going on everybody out there? Welcome to Gamers with Gains. I'm the Epic Jake James Lugo, and I got a brand new video for all of you guys that I'm pretty sure most of you are going to like. This time around I'm talking about Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy. Now most of you guys know, if you guys have checked out any of my videos, you guys know that I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, but I'm also a huge Kingdom Hearts fan. It is probably one of my most favorite series I've ever played in all my years of actually playing video games. So, it was only natural that at some point I talked about the games themselves and actually gave you guys some insight on some of my most favorite moments in the Kingdom Hearts series in relation to Final Fantasy. Now, let's be real for a second. This doesn't necessarily mean cameos exclusively, like some of the best cameos in the actual series, because there's going to be some kind of like overlapping here and there, and I'm going to be talking about specifically moments in all of the entire series that I felt that were really awesome and that were really noteworthy, not only to me as a game player, but to most of you guys out there, especially if you played the games for the first time back on the PlayStation 2. But without any further ado, let's jump into the countdown and actually start counting down the top 5 best Final Fantasy moments in the Kingdom Hearts series. Zack's appearances in Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. Now this is pretty interesting for me, because number one, I'm a Zack Fair fan, especially after playing Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. But I like the design choice to actually use Zack as a Final Fantasy character cameo rather than use Cloud, especially in relation to where in the timeline that Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep takes place, years prior to the first Kingdom Hearts game. And it's very cool too, because depending on which character you're playing as when you go to the Olympus Coliseum, each character, Aqua, Ventus, and Terra, all have different interactions with Zack in relation to the overall arcing story that's going on. Terra has a big boss battle with Zack when he actually goes to the Olympus Coliseum, and it plays into some of the events that happen in both Ventus and Terra's story as well. It's a double kind of, sided or two-staged boss battle, where at first you're fighting Zack when he has this like helmet on, where it's kind of like a Greco-Roman helmet I guess he picked up. It's not nothing with one of the soldier helmets from Final Fantasy VII. And then the second stage of it is when he takes off the helmet, he becomes a little more possessed by the darkness that Hades is actually controlling him with. It's very cool also because his personality is very, very true to how he was in Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. He's always, looking to become a hero. He's doing squats, which was kind of a big thing in Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, a little joke here and there. But also he has, a lot of gall to actually go up and ask Aqua out on a date, very similar to what he did with Ares back in Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. I thought it was a great choice. It would have been very awkward if they decided to use Cloud or, again, like Sephiroth or any of those characters, again, in relation to where this actually takes place in the timeline. But I like it, it's a very cool moment, and I hope you guys liked it as well. Zack makes it to my number 5 spot. The struggle fight between Roxas and Setzer in Kingdom Hearts 2. Now this is a very interesting Final Fantasy moment, because I'm pretty sure, like me, most of you guys out there that played the Kingdom Hearts 2 for the first time way back when didn't recognize or didn't realize who this was, and you probably mistook him for someone like Seymour from Final Fantasy X. But he's actually not from that game. He's actually from Final Fantasy VI. Setzer is an actual gambler in Final Fantasy VI that's the only one to own the actual airship in the game. And what makes this really significant is not only is that he's an actual unique character to appear from a game outside of something like Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, or 10 for that matter, he's the only pre-era character that appears in a game that's prior to any of those more recent PlayStation Final Fantasy titles. There are other characters that appear from Final Fantasy VI in Kingdom Hearts 2 that are actually shop owners, but he's the only character to be rendered out in 3D and actually have some sort of significance to the story. It's a very interesting fight during the time you spend with Roxas in Kingdom Hearts 2, and it's very unique because he actually looks very, very, over-exaggerated and oozes personality that you normally don't see from a lot of other Final Fantasy characters that are outside of the typical 7, 8, and 9 kind of roster. But he's number 4. Oren's appearance in Kingdom Hearts 2. Now, this is definitely one of my personal favorites because I'm a huge fan of Final Fantasy X, and one of my most favorite characters from that game was Oren, so it was a real treat for me to see him in Kingdom Hearts when I actually first played Kingdom Hearts 2 back in the day. But just what's even more cool about this moment is the way that Square Enix handles his actual reveal, and their timing is so good. When he first comes out and actually you see Oren for the first time in Kingdom Hearts 2, he's summoned from the pit of Tartarus by Hades and is actually about to be employed by Hades in order to take out Hercules and kill him in the arena in the Colosseum. But in much more typical fashion and true to his character, Oren has a few choice words for Hades in response to his offer. Now that's just freaking badass, I have to say. Overall, it is a very cool moment to actually see Oren in Kingdom Hearts 2, and the best part about his inclusion is that unlike most of the other Final Fantasy characters you get to see, you actually get to fight alongside Oren and actually have him in your party. That was one thing that when I first played the first Kingdom Hearts for the first time way back when, I always wanted to have some of the other Final Fantasy characters in my party to actually use, besides Donald and Goofy typically, or any of the other Disney characters that you come across in any of the different worlds. I always thought it would be awesome to actually fight alongside, Cloud, Leon, Squall in this case, I'm calling him Squall, and someone like Oren to actually fight alongside me while I'm taking on the Heartless, and especially during the boss battles. I thought that would make, an already epic game into something even more epic on top of that. But I finally got my chance to hang alongside Oren in Kingdom Hearts 2, and it was such an awesome moment, and it definitely deserves my number 3 spot on this countdown. The Sephiroth boss fight from Kingdom Hearts 1. Now, I almost don't really need to say anything at all about this boss fight, especially for a lot of you that it's pretty much self-explanatory if you played the first Kingdom Hearts back on the PlayStation 2 days. This boss fight and this inclusion of Sephiroth was so unexpected and out of left field, but it was such a neat surprise to actually see him appear in the game. And he appears just as menacing as what you would expect if you played Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1. But, with that being said, the reason why it was so unexpected for a lot of people, including myself, was that earlier in the game we saw other Final Fantasy VII characters pop up here and there, not only in Traverse Town, but also in the Colosseum. And for this one, it's such, so late into the game and like pretty much the end game type of content, because a lot of people that would really recommend when you actually take on Sephiroth, make sure that you're at level 99 as well as wielding some boss equipment to actually tackle and stay afloat during the entirety of the fight. With that being said though, this fight is incredibly vicious, with Sephiroth launching all kinds of crazy attacks at you, both quick as well as devastatingly powerful, including Sin Heartless Angel, which is absolutely nuts, in which it drains all of your HP and your MP right down to the most minuscule amount, so he could just come in at you with a quick attack. Very true to his character as being super powerful and super fast in general. But even more cool is just some of the other attacks as you kind of go through the entirety of the fight. Not only does he get powered up and becomes incredibly faster than normal in the beginning of the fight, but he also starts doing things like an attack that's very similar to Meteor from Final Fantasy VII. Or for some of you aficionados out there, it's kind of like the earlier games in the Final Fantasy series. But basically it looks incredibly epic and nuts, and it's devastatingly powerful if it hits you. It's one of those occasions where you actually gotta just run you kind of bid your time for the most part, and kind of strike out the opportunity when it opens up to you. Again, it's very neat to see this, but one of the things back on the PlayStation 2 days was that you didn't really get much for actually defeating Sephiroth. You kind of got bragging rights, and righteously so. But in the more later iterations of Kingdom Hearts 1, specifically Final Mix, and Final Mix on the Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD, you actually not only got an extra Keyblade called the One-Winged Angel, very kind of in tune to Sephiroth, but you also got some extra cutscenes, which was pretty neat. Some of the moments that you actually get to see in the cutscenes is that you get to see Sephiroth kind of dissipating into the light after you defeat him, but also you get this really cool choreographed fight sequence between Cloud and Sephiroth, which I thought was really awesome the first time I saw. It's pretty much, they don't have any dialogue between the two, and it's just them kind of like smuttering off stuff in the different bubbles, about, the darkness and stuff that, I am you and such. Very typical stuff if you played, Final Fantasy VII, or if you saw the sequences in Kingdom Hearts 2. But it just looks pretty awesome back then, and actually seeing it for the first time, as part of the whole final mixed version of Kingdom Hearts 1. Now, I will say this, though. This makes my list over the Sephiroth boss fight in Kingdom Hearts 2 because I felt that this one had much more emotional impact the first time around when we saw it. Granted, in Kingdom Hearts 2, not only did Sephiroth and the rest of the Final Fantasy gang actually had voice acting and they had interactions, it had a really cool fight sequence after you actually fought Sephiroth in Kingdom Hearts 2. But definitely, though, I love the actual boss fight in Kingdom Hearts 1. It's not only harder, but it has a much more impactful appearance and just much greater sense of epicness than that of Kingdom Hearts' 2 Sephiroth boss fight. And that's why it takes my number 2 spot on my countdown. The big showdown in Hollow Bastion in Kingdom Hearts 2. Now, hands down, this has to be probably my most favorite moment of the entire Kingdom Hearts series because it is just freaking awesome. That's like literally the best way to put it. Just going and experiencing the sequence, even just looking at it now in this video, you guys could get a sense of an idea of like how crazy this whole series of events was in Hollow Bastion. This is the part of the story when you go and you're trying to help the Restoration Committee actually restore Hollow Bastion to Radiant Garden, but with all these Heartless overrunning the entire area, there's this giant battle, giant scale battle at that, that's just going on, and everybody who's anybody is in Hollow Bastion at this point. Not only just Final Fantasy characters, but you also got different Disney characters as well. You have King Mickey, who shows up later on after explaining to you about who Ansem the Wise was in the DTD, but also you have different little minor characters that just show up like Stitch and such that are just contributing to the battle. But hands down, you get to see all these different Final Fantasy characters from all over the place, and all these different cameos come together in this one giant battle. Now, granted, the actual sequence has some of its kind of like low points here and there, which I'll get to in a minute, but where I feel really this whole sequence of events and like moments that's just crazy really starts to pick up is when you actually get to see Cloud and Squall, Leon, team up for the first time. When you actually see them back to back alongside each other, actually staring down all these Heartless, and just like it gives a sense of not only the epic nature of what's going on, but just it really gives you like that fan service that everybody wanted from something like this in this series. It just putting them together, seeing them together side by side, back to back, getting ready to take on all the Heartless around them was just awesome. That literally was just amazing just to see that. And it just made it even much more awesome on top of that later on as you see the battle play out, as you get to see different events going on. Granted, Sora, Donald, and Goofy are there for the most part, but the real meat and potatoes of what's happening and what's going on is seeing all these characters just take on all the Heartless and just these legions and legions of Heartless all over the place. Now, speaking back to those low points that I mentioned before, one of the kind of gripes that I had was that I didn't get to have any of these Final Fantasy characters as members of my party. I always said, again, earlier in the countdown, I wanted these guys to actually be in my party at some point and actually fight alongside me, besides this one big giant battle sequence that I got. Granted, it was awesome, it was amazing, like, it really topped many of the stuff that was, like, throughout the entire game. But that was one of the things I always said, is that I want to be teamed up with Leon, I want to be teamed up with Cloud, or I want to be teamed up with Yuffie at some point, or give me the option to actually have them in my party. The other kind of like small little nuanced point I want to kind of drop out there is that the interpretation of the Gull Wings wasn't kind of like the most, the best, thing for me. It wasn't really something that really stuck with me, and it kind of annoyed me a little bit, seeing, Riku, Yuna, as well as Pain show up as little fairies. But just the fact that they're there in this sequence, granted they did annoy me a little bit, it just was awesome, and it really gave a sense, again, the urgency of like, the big scale battle that everybody was involved with. Seeing Leon or seeing Cloud actually do their crazy attacks and fighting alongside me, even though they're not in my party, was still definitely worth it, and definitely, worth going through the entire game just for this one, section of it. Granted, the entire game of Kingdom Hearts 2 is awesome in itself, but this really kind of brought that home. And this was one of those moments or one of those sections that actually really was probably one of the highest points of the actual series, because it was Disney and Final Fantasy characters really coming together into this giant scale battle and giant, series of events that really gave a sense of epicness. It was that cool. It was fan service to the nth degree. And really, this hands down is probably one of my most favorite moments of the entire Kingdom Hearts series, but definitely one of my most favorite moments that are Final Fantasy related in Kingdom Hearts. Hands down. And there you have it, guys. Those are my top 5 favorite Final Fantasy moments in the Kingdom Hearts series. Now, agree or disagree, I hope you guys enjoyed the video enough to leave a comment in the comment section below and like the video. Tell me what some of your favorite Final Fantasy moments in the Kingdom Hearts series are, or any other noteworthy moments in the entire Kingdom Hearts series. Let's get a good discussion going on down there in the comments section. And also, let me know if you like these types of videos, so that way, in case you guys want more, I'll keep coming up with some cool ideas to bring you guys some great new content and great new top 5 countdowns. Don't forget to check out all the rest of my other videos on the Gamers with Gains channel, including videos to help you grow stronger and much more healthier as a gamer, as well as any other cool gaming related videos that you guys might want to check out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video again. Don't be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you guys again real soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.